if, coming out of this, the news corporation decided it should be a news organization. And that fundamentally is the difference. Once it aligns with particular politicians, particular belief systems, it ceases to be that. And frankly, they're making in-kind campaign contributions to a number of politicians and against others. And the truth is that if any of us could even pay for that, it would constitute an enormous in-kind contribution, which of course is illegal. You can't have corporations giving to American political campaigns. And so the whole structure does violence to not just journalism, but to our politics in a way that shouldn't surprise any of us. But boy, to see it in black and white like that is amazing.
I don't think I've ever read even a quote from a newspaper, definitely not from the Wall Street Journal, that read the C word, Jeremy Peters, but in trying to report out, I know you're on this story as well this week, what led to his firing, we know it wasn't the content, right? The content was anything but thinly veiled. It was flagrantly racist. It was anti-U.S. military in the view of a lot of people in the military. It was anti-bipartisan U.S. foreign policy when it came to the war in Ukraine. But it is revealed in this story, which was why we're starting with it, that his hostility and animosity that he, quote, wanted the world to see toward his own executives was one of the tipping points. How does that play into your understanding of this week's events?
This is a major reason he's no longer there, Nicole. There were a lot of contributing factors to his demise, and patience had been wearing thin at the highest levels of the company with Tucker Carlson for a long time, and that included with the Murdochs. I mean, here is somebody who is anti-vaccine, yet the head of the company, Rupert Murdoch, was one of the first
terrorists
for money. He was vaccinated very early
on America.
Deal with it, and Tucker Carlson also, of course, was a January 6th denialist, and that got so bad, and his repeated insistence that this is just a group of something like tourists who were ambling through the Capitol innocently, it really rankled the Murdochs, and it just one episode after the other piled up, and when you have a human resources issue like this, that tends to be when Fox pulls the trigger. Remember with Bill O'Reilly, with Roger Ailes, they didn't get shown the door because of anything that they allowed on the air at Fox. It was ultimately because there was a complaint, or in their case, it was multiple complaints internally, and that's what we see here. We know, from my colleague Nick Compassori's reporting that there had been some HR investigations into Tucker Carlson's behavior, the creation of a hostile workplace, and
listen, but triage your vessel,
the kind of conduct that was condoned on that set was just really appalling. And I think what happened, at least what my reporting tells me, it was just this accumulation of problems. He became a management headache that they were no longer willing to tolerate, and Tucker Carlson learned, like many other people have in the past who thought they were untouchable, that you ultimately serve at the pleasure of the Murdoch family.
I mean, David Jelly, if you're calling an executive above you the C word and you want the world to know, how are you treating Abby Grossberg?
Yeah, look, I think we're learning a lot about Tucker Carlson, the person, as a result of this. Your conversation with Abby yesterday enlightening the country on the workplace situation under Tucker Carlson's leadership, if you will. And for that, he deserves scorn and accountability. And ultimately, I suppose the network decided that too much was too much. But I also think, to Sean Patrick's point, the question is, does this represent at all a new editorial direction for Fox News? And apparently that answer is no, right? The more we learn that this is about Tucker Carlson's own failings, his own hostile work environment, it is less and less about the great replacement theory or his antagonism towards the LGBT community or his line about the vaccine or his embrace of dictators around the world or his denial of the election. Apparently it's none of that.
All I want to hear from them is they're going to start acting like lawful news corporations.
And a narrative around falsehoods as they are leaving it with Tucker Carlson. The one intriguing thing, Nicole, is look, there are camps in today's Republican Party. And for the Trump family, personally, to be so offended by Tucker's termination on the heels of Laura Trump herself being terminated, I don't know what that means for the Fox family and the relationship with Trump, so long as he remains the front runner in the Republican nomination.
That's really interesting. That's like the inside the wrinkles in the sort of ideological or intellectual rot on the right. I'm wondering a little bit more from this Wall Street Journal reporting, and that it's in the Wall Street Journal is interesting to me, also owned by the Murdochs. Journal reports this: while Mr. Carlson's Tucker Carlson Tonight was popular, it was also repellent to blue chip advertisers. Tucker Carlson's show has filled the void mostly with ads from direct response advertisers and My Pillow Inc., the pillow manufacturer's commercial star CEO Mike Lindell, who has also appeared as a guest on Tucker Carlson Tonight and was one of the most prominent people spreading the false election fraud narrative. The lack of advertiser demand meant the commercials in many cases weren't being sold at a premium or at a rate commensurate with its audience size, which meant it wasn't providing a financial windfall to the network. People familiar with the network's operations said. I mean, this was news to me that, I mean, he does a huge audience, which if you do what he does, if you do what I do, that is one indicator. But that it didn't correlate to what the Wall Street Journal describes as blue chip advertisers. Maybe it should have been obvious. I didn't watch it enough to take in who all the advertisers were. But when, Mike Lindell, who I believe is also being sued by Dominion or some of the voting systems company, is your biggest advertiser, and your fate is sort of tied together with the pillow guy. This seems unsurprising.
Yeah, anytime you look over and the only guy with you is Mr. Pillow, it's probably a bad sign, just in general. But can I just say something? Look, I just think that what we have learned is that hatred is like a performance-enhancing drug. It will kill you eventually, but in the short term, it creates all kinds of strength and unfair competition, and that fueled his rise. And Fox and News Corporation were more than happy enough to profit from that. And by the way, I'm sure there were plenty of blue chip corporations who thought it was fun. I mean, when you're creating this monster in the dungeon and you're screaming it's alive, everybody gets excited. But now it's loose in the village, right? And once it's tearing things up and creating more trouble than it's worth, then you move on. But as David said, some of us are begging them to just be conservative, not cynical, not phony. And if the C word is really consequences in this case, then that's good. But it should be for the network and its owners, not just for one host, because they can replace him tomorrow. And we've seen them do that before.
Yeah. I mean, Jeremy, do you have any reporting that suggests that content, other than to the degree that it was, quote, repellent to advertisers, was a factor? Or is it more this pileup of conduct and animosity toward the executives?
I mean, certainly some of the content on the air, especially around the January 6th denialism, did not sit well with the Murdochs, I'm told. I mean, it certainly, Rupert Murdoch and Lachlan, his son, who run the company, felt, as far back as last summer, that Donald Trump was so toxic, and his continued lies about the election, so destructive to the Republican Party's fortunes in the upcoming midterm elections, that Donald Trump didn't appear on the air for much of 2022 on Fox News. It was like 200 plus days that Fox went without airing a single interview with Donald Trump. So the Murdochs believe that this kind of a denialism, this revisionist history, is ultimately really bad for the party. And where Tucker comes into that is his false claims that somehow January 6th was a false flag operation. And if you think about it, what Rupert Murdoch was trying to do is pull Fox News and the rest of his operation back toward the politics of conservatism that he's comfortable with, and that's more of the Mitch McConnell mold.
40 years they planned this shit to destroy America.
That his channels elevate these, far-right incendiary commentators. He's more of a Mitch McConnell.
They called it alternative truth.
Controversy after controversy, elevating these stories that Carlson himself expressed doubt about, and in some cases knew not to be true, I think was a contributing factor once you add in the constant human resources issues, the bullying workplace.
Oh my God.
It just became
It's so hard, but you gotta breathe.
You gotta go. You're more trouble than you're worth.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, David Jolly, I don't share Murdoch's interest in purging the network of Tucker Carlson because he damages the wings of the Republican Party that Rupert Murdoch thinks are worth salvaging. I think that Tucker Carlson's role as sort of the head of the fish that's been chopped off is interesting as a Homeland Security story. Because what he amplified and what he exacerbated and what he gave voice to sits at the intersection of the current threat of domestic violent extremism. The very things he railed against, mask mandates, vaccine mandates. I mean, his attacks against the United States military were absolutely galling, and that wasn't a circuit breaker. For someone like a Tom Cotton to say, I'm going to boycott the network until Tucker Carlson apologizes to the military in which I serve. No, Tom Cotton participated in some of that. I mean, I think that the Tucker Carlson story about, and Jeremy's right, this is what drove Murdoch. But in terms of why it's, I think, an interesting story in covering the current threat of domestic violent extremism, it's because of what he revealed there's such an appetite for. And I want to show some of that specifically about white supremacy.
The press and the Democratic Party have a new label for anybody they disagree with. White nationalism. I'm not sure I know what white power is. I don't even know what white nationalism means. White supremacy, that's the problem. This is a hoax. How is it white supremacy? That's not white supremacy. Somebody tell us in very clear language what a white supremacist is. White nationalism. Let's be literal for a minute. What is that? What is white supremacy? We still don't know, despite fervent and sincere efforts to find out what a white supremacist is. So again, what is a white supremacist?
So, everyone that watched Tucker Carlson's show is not a white supremacist, but I'm sure that among the white supremacist viewing habits, Tucker Carlson was often DVR'd. I mean, what do you make of this too cute by half? I don't know what a white supremacist is.
He knows. Let me take a shot at answering Tucker Carlson when he says, what's a white nationalist or what's white nationalism? It's somebody that espouses the Great Replacement theory who actually calls immigrants dirty and poor and who will infect our culture. What does he mean by that? He means that black and brown immigrants are dirty and poor and are going to infect white nationalist American culture. That's it, Tucker. That's you. You said it. There, your question's answered. Now, what I find fascinating by this, Nicole, is the way that Murdoch is trying to really pinch him and clearly keep him in a box. Murdoch is using his platforms to try to keep Tucker from coming out and saying anything else. And the question is he really trying to keep, the Rush Limbaugh of this generation in a cage? And as Jeremy said, maybe try to redirect some of the conservative conversation? Or is he trying to prevent the marketability of Tucker Carlson? And I think that's where the insults around the advertising comes in, because, it's not often understood that ratings don't translate to revenue. And so even Murdoch is not just saying he doesn't represent who we are as a corporation, but he's also not as profitable as the media world might think he is. Murdoch is going right at Carlson here. I would love to think it is because Carlson has this history of flirting with white nationalism, flirting with authoritarians around the world. We haven't seen that signal from Murdoch, but perhaps Jeremy's right, and I think the nation would be better.
Made a monster.
Jeremy, let me read a little bit more of what was unearthed through the Dominion lawsuit. These were texts between Tucker Carlson and an unknown, it sounds like colleague. The unknown colleague writes to Tucker, great show so far. I know that B-block script was wordy, but it came out great. Tucker Carlson, it was awesome. Sidney Powell is a lying F-word, B-word. Unknown writes back, it is top article on Mediaite, unknown. I also sent to Breitbart, Caller, Examiner and New York Times, Carlson, dude, nice job. The rest of the text is redacted. How much of what was redacted? I was led to believe by some folks close to the Dominion side that a lot of it was redacted because it was very embarrassing, sort of politically explosive, maybe not legally devastating. How much do you think will sort of remain redacted? What is the current state of what we know was sort of captured in the discovery process but never seen by the general public because the trial didn't happen?
Well, first, think about everything that we now know about the disparaging way that Tucker Carlson spoke about a president he pretended to be a champion of. Think about the way he spoke of his colleagues and the toxic workplace environment that he helped create. Think about all of the things he has said on his air that didn't just, tiptoe up against the line of being racist. They were racist. So he wasn't fired when we knew any of that, when any of that was revealed. He was fired this week once it became clear that he was bad for business. He was bad for the Fox brand, and ultimately, that's what we saw here. It wasn't a decision based on anything he had really said on the air. It was based on what he said privately. And I think Fox has always been so concerned about what is behind those big black boxes on page after page of court filings in the Dominion defamation case. We may get to see more of those. So the New York Times and other news organizations have challenged those redactions because under the law, you can't redact something, Nicole, as you point out, just because
who cares about the law? They don't.
In the case, I was there when he said it to Fox. You can't, just because somebody says something that maybe wasn't so bright, doesn't mean that you can take it out and put it under a black mark. But that seems to be what Fox has done in many of these instances. So I don't know how the judge will ultimately decide, if he decides at all, but there is the possibility that we could see more of these redactions because Fox used too heavy a hand here.
I constantly, pressing myself to explain why this matters. Claire made a good point. So Tucker's got an audience of about 3 million. Tens of millions of people vote, just on the Republican side. It matters because a show watched by just 3 million people sets the agenda for the entire party. I mean, Tucker he cast the speaker, right? And Matt Gaetz and all these others are on his show saying, Tucker's telling them what to ask for, and they're like, dude, I got nothing left to ask. I got everything you told me to ask. It truly is a media-run state on the right in America.
Oh, yeah.
What are your concerns about that?
Media runs state.
Where to start? I mean, for starters, I was there on January 6th, and it took a lot less than 3 million people to break into the Capitol and to hurt a lot of police officers and to shake the foundation of our democracy. Yeah. So when you can reach that many people and incite to violence, even a small fraction of it can have enormous consequences. In fact, even one person can change the course of American history. So you're playing with fire, for one thing. But what really has to happen is that, good, accurate reporting needs to be a good business model. And that's on all of us. And it'd be nice if the News Corporation would give it a try, because I think there's a market for conservative viewpoints, God knows. I mean, they do it well in other contexts, particularly on the news pages of the Wall Street Journal.
Please.
There are reputable conservative outlets out there. It's not impossible. But you cannot have this effort to create a power center in American politics under the guise of a news organization. It is deeply corrupting, and we have seen the consequences. Last point, Tucker Carlson is unique in that he did bring to the surface some of the darkest stuff on the internet. Totally. That even other Fox News hosts wouldn't
Everybody
touch.
went along.
And so to really bring that into the mainstream is a new level, a new low. And so thank God he in particular is gone, at least for now. But the network has got to clean up its act.
Yeah, and there's no, I mean, the carnage is, you could make a list that could go from the ceiling to the floor 5 times. I mean, Ray Epps, who was an oath keeper, was on 60 Minutes talking about how his life was destroyed by Tucker's obsession with January 6th being an inside job. But I think the important thing to always keep front and center is he wasn't fired over content, as far as we know. That's why people like Jeremy are still on this story, and we keep consuming everything he
We're supposed to be a consensus.
Jeremy, thank you very much for starting us off today. David Jelly,
love
thank you
you.
for starting us
Thank
off and
you
centering
so
us.
much.
Former Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney is along for the hour. When we come
Nicole
back,
and your
E.
team.
Jean Carroll's civil case against
And
the twice
Rachel.
impeached
Oh my God, you guys really saved my life.
The president is unfolding right now in Manhattan. She was one of the first witnesses on the stand after the judge
I'm so
issued
proud
a
of
warning
you.
about the ex-president's potential tampering in this case. We'll fill you in on all of it next. Plus, Republicans learning nothing from what happened in Tennessee, taking their fight against democracy to Montana. A transgender Democratic lawmaker was prevented from speaking on the House floor. And today, late this afternoon, Republicans are seeking to punish her. And later in the show, enforcing an ethics code at the United States Supreme Court. It is a topic we've covered a lot around here. Well, Congress is getting serious about enacting one. We'll speak to a member of the Senate Judiciary
Thank you,
Committee. All
Jesus.
that and more
Thank
when
you.
Diddley White House continues after a quick
Thank
break.
you, my Lord.
Anywhere.
Thank you, defenders of truth.